2023 has been an absolute bombshell of a year for the gaming industry, with bangers dropping left and right, good title after good title. And in a year like this, with AAA game development firing on all cylinders, it's very easy to forget the little guys. So as such, I would have never guessed that one of my top experiences would have come from a small-scale, low-budget indie title. An indie title known as Dave the Diver. Dave the Diver is a cute little game about running a sushi store, with the exciting twist that you, Dave, are the one doing the fish hunting, diving out in scuba gear every day to stock shelves for your business. And despite my reservations about hopping into a brand new title so close to the end of the year, in a year where I still haven't finished like the top 4 games that are in the running to be my personal game of the year, on a personal recommendation, I gave this game a shot. And oh boy am I glad that I did, because this game is built for a busy-brained person like me. The core gameplay here involves Dave diving out to sea to hunt fish, the ocean you explore being a large map with several explorable nooks and crannies with more segments to unlock, a la Symphony of the Night. And from the outset, they nail the feel of ocean diving. I don't know about you guys, but water exploration and integration is some of my favorite parts of any video game. I love the water levels, and man, they nail it here. The actual buttons on the controller gameplay is more or less your standard twin-stick shooter, but the music, the graphics, the vibes, they all capture that odd but beautiful isolation that comes from exploring the ocean by yourself. It's a very specific vibe that they nail, and I love it. From here, you can hunt fish using either your harpoon or your gun, both of which can be upgraded either permanently or temporarily with power-ups found throughout the dive. You can also upgrade how deep you can dive, unlocking more of the map, and you can upgrade the amount of fish that you can return to the surface with. And all of this exploration is limited only to the amount of air you can find in the wild. Your oxygen tank doubles as your health, and as long as your oxygen tank persists, you can stay in the water. And while you can push past your physical limits and dive deeper than recommended and carry more weight than allotted, it will cause significant slowdown and faster drainage of your oxygen. This ended up being a non-issue for me most of the time. Limits are meant to be broken, and as such, I spent most of my playtime encumbered because I am stubborn and willing to slog through the negatives. You upgrade all these different facets of your character with gold. Gold that is earned by serving in the sushi restaurant yourself. And this brings us to the other significant chunk of Dave the Diver's gameplay. In here, it's a little more fast-paced as you set the dinner menu with whatever you manage to catch that day, and then proceed to rush your way through several mini-games in order to satisfy as many customers as possible in the small amount of time provided by the dinner rush. And this other side of the gameplay comes with a whole host of other managerial duties, including obtaining new recipes, unlocking more new hires, managing the restaurant's social media pages, and customizing the interior. This is one of those games that tosses so much at the player all at once, and having played this game, I only want them to throw even more at me, which they routinely do. You unlock multiple farms, the ability to dive during the night for different fish, the ability to take photos and research for other NPCs, and speaking of NPCs, I completely neglected to mention the NPCs, all of whom have quirky personalities, backstories, and relationships for you to uncover, alongside an underlying story about the mythical mer people that runs concurrently as a secondary motivator. There's a lot here for the player to tackle, but more than that, everything here feeds into each other. We have our cyclical gameplay loop, and everything you do in one step informs what you're trying to achieve in the next step. While you're hunting for fish, you find the city of the mer people, but in order to explore it, you need to upgrade your suit. And in order to upgrade your suit, you need to get gold from serving in the restaurant. And in order to get gold from serving in the restaurant, you need to dive and get fish, which is how you found the city in the first place. It's an undeniably addicting feedback loop made all the better by the game just being the most charming thing in the world. With this lovely pixel art style that gets flexed in some pretty impressive ways with its cutscenes, and character writing that's silly enough for me to actually want to read it, it's no wonder that this game has already nabbed itself a couple nominations for Indie Game of the Year. It's a bizarrely charming time that's so married to its premise that it can really afford to run with all these otherwise conflicting gameplay ideas and make the most out of them. It's truly one of the indie darlings of the year. However, there is one big problem with that statement. Because Dave the Diver isn't an indie game. Dave the Diver is developed by Mint Rocket, who is a subsidiary of Nexon. Nexon is mostly known for the MapleStory series and their contribution in the mobile space, but as of December 2021, Nexon has over 7,000 employees. And while the Mint Rocket team is likely a percentage of that 7,000 people, they still have the financial backing and technical support of a gigantic company. In fact, Mint Rocket has even gone on record and stated that they do not consider themselves an indie studio, just that the untraditional approach to the gameplay of Dave the Diver was enough to justify its reputation as an indie game. Wikipedia would tell you that an indie title is one without the support of a larger company. But let's think for a moment. When was the last time you played an indie game that wasn't supported by a large outside being in any format? It is a whole nebulous world of technical and legal mumbo jumbo trying to navigate a proper understanding for the title of indie game. And it's a world that I'm not sure many people even understand is a problem. See, here's the thing. The confusion that I'm having may not matter most of the time, but it does matter in one key time of the year, and that is award season. At the time of recording, Dave the Diver has already snagged itself 2 Indie Game of the Year nominations at 2 different award shows, which is odd to me because while Dave the Diver was clearly made by a team that had a lot of love and passion for the fun of video games, they also created it with a bigger team and in an environment where they were afforded a lot of luxuries your typical indie developer might not have. Like, for example, job security. And it's not like the dev team was pushing this as an indie title or anything. I just think a lot of gamers see a shorter game with worse graphics and automatically assume that it's an indie title. In fact, main benefactor and host of the Game Awards, Jeff Keighley, basically said that Dave the Diver counts as an indie game because he thinks it's like an indie game. It's like people view game development priorities as a scale. 3D art and realism, that's only for the big boys like PlayStation to do. But what about the indie games that don't fall into the indie game category? 2 that come to mind are the indie darling of last year, Stray, and the big game of the year 2023 contender, Baldur's Gate 3, both of which are longer, graphically realistic titles that are, yes, technically considered indies. But how come that's not on the best indie game of the year list? And on that, at what point does it become unfair to try and squeeze games like this into the same awards category? We have to remember that a large portion of mainstream gamers are very stupid and hate things like 2D games or non-realistic art styles or pixel art, and as much as we want to pretend that our favorite things are the most popular, things like this are a significant turnoff for a large portion of the gaming market. And you really think someone who thinks like that, your average unplugged gamer who's voting on the Game Awards, will see Stray next to Cult of the Lamb and choose Cult of the Lamb as the better game? I think that negative perception of certain gaming tropes is part of the reason why Dave the Diver was automatically assumed to be an indie game. And I think that same negative perception could be weaponized against the genre as a whole. I'm kinda just talking out of my ass right now, but I don't think it's unreasonable to assume that a bad actor could see the success and numbers something like Dave the Diver is doing and try to make their own quote-unquote indie, knowing how the gaming community loves to embrace titles like that. Like, this may be an uncharitable opinion, but you gotta see the value of drawing a line in the sand between a group of people, or sometimes just one guy releasing something all by themselves, and a small team and an already larger company releasing something that is experimental. Because while someone like you or I might see this lineup and be able to identify the strengths and weaknesses of Dave the Diver's semi-independent journey, your average unplugged consumer probably won't, and equivocating all of them as members of the same group is reductive to all parties involved. Indie games are often celebrated for their experimental gameplay, experimental visual styles, deeply personal stories, and taking risks that larger studios oftentimes can't afford to take. However, those things aren't necessarily exclusive to indies. Indie games are some of my favorite experiences I have ever had gaming, and we should shine a spotlight on them. But we should also make sure we're spotlighting the actual indies. Especially in times like this, where game developing giants are routinely laying off employees trying to chase endlessly high profit margins. We need to celebrate our indie devs because sometimes it feels like these guys are the only people not trying to extort me for my wallet. Indie games are a testament of the human spirit, doing something for the love of the craft and love of the craft alone. And in the current gaming landscape of endlessly greedy bigwigs, I just think they deserve to be celebrated properly. See ya.